Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Eric Wilson. Eric is Director of Thought Leadership at the Institute of Business Forecasting, IBF. Welcome to the podcast, Eric.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for our chat. First of all, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do in your role and at IBF?
Yeah, I guess I probably should start with IBF, because if you're Director of Thought Leadership of IBF, I got to start with the IBF part. IBF is a membership organization that helps foster the growth of people in the fields of predictive analytics, business forecasting, demand planning, S&OP, sales and operations planning, those related fields. It's about 55,000 members worldwide. And it's really about the trends and what's going on in their field and in their industry. So being the director of thought leadership, then my role is kind of that liaison between the membership, what's going on in the field, what are those trends, what are the best practices, what's happening inside our in different organizations, and being able to communicate that, share it, and so people can understand exactly where we're going.
Amazing. That's fantastic. What a wonderful organization and a wonderful role to have within that organization. I think that makes your role really interesting. I'm keen to hear some of your story, and I know listeners love hearing, some of those moments, even as far back as childhood. For you, when you were younger, what are some of the moments that really shaped you to become the person and the leader you are today, Eric?
Well, I've always been, I guess, entrepreneurial. Even in high school, I, had my own type of businesses that I did in high school that I ran. And after that, I developed my own businesses right out of college. I paid my way through college, owning my own business, which was quite successful at that time. From there, I then went into more the entrepreneurial, where I hone those entrepreneurial skills inside of organizations that it is. So I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial leadership type of attitude in my life. I've said everywhere since high school.
And what about when you were in high school? Are there any moments that really stand out to you, or even during that journey that's so fascinating that you really ran sort of businesses to pay your way through college? Were there any significant aha moments for you, like where you went, oh, wow, I can actually do this, or favorite failures where you really dropped the ball, but you look back and think that was so formative and I learned so much?
Yeah, well, most of the successes were just affirmations of what I was already doing. So unfortunately, I didn't have the maturity level to really learn from those successes that I had, even though I had a lot of successes, as I said, in high school, paying my way through college, very successful. I think the biggest lessons learned were those setbacks. And that's when I had my, business out of college. It was a very successful business. So then I decided to take that and to start another business, because I assumed everything I touched was gold at that point. So I went into a totally different type of business. It was a retail type of business. Everything I did before was more distribution. One was, going more of almost software type at the time. Now I went into a retail business because I wanted people to see what I did and have a retail front business. Totally different animal. I didn't understand that animal fully, but I thought I was unstoppable. After about 2 years and continuing putting more and more of my own money in, I had to end up closing that business and walking away with a lot more debt than I ever had, because everything else I was making money on. So that was one of the biggest lessons I learned, that, hey, guess what? I can't do it all. And that lesson actually came from, I said, about 2 years into the business, I brought a consulting company in to kind of figure out what was wrong. And they spent 2 days looking my merchandising plan, marketing plan, looked over all the books, everything. And the person sat across the table from me. And he said, this business will not succeed as long as you're sitting there. And my first thought was, what do you mean? This business wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I am the business. And that was the problem. I was the business. I didn't understand all the hats I wore. Some of them didn't quite fit right. I had to find people that had expertise in different areas. It was too late for that business, but the big lesson I learned was I have expertise, and surrounding myself with other people who have expertise in what they do that complement me really makes what I do better. And that was the biggest lesson I learned from that.
Yeah, incredible. That's such a great lesson, and appreciate you sharing that story. So fast forward after that, in that next season, as you started, like you said, entrepreneurship, and you started getting to hone those skills, and then more recently as well, do you have any sort of favorite moments or stories that stand out in your mind as being really pivotal in shaping Eric in more recent times?
Well, I decided what as far as skill sets I had, guys, I understood at that point I couldn't wear every hat. And what I enjoyed the most was really the forward-looking aspect of business, the being able to strategic thinking, especially from an analytical standpoint, being able to see how things are connected. I understood those were the strengths that I had. So I went into an organization that I could start helping develop those skill sets even more inside that organization. And that's what I got into. What's called sales and operations planning, which is just a business process, which is cross-functional. It's more strategic looking. It's a help for an organization really to drive business decisions, especially when it comes to supply chain and other types of functions. So I started developing that function there. I came in as just a manager type of level at that organization, but I was dealing at that time with the C-suites, with the CEOs, and really have that capability. We're talking about defining moments of understanding it didn't matter what role I was in. It really mattered how I presented, what I was doing inside of organizations, that you wasn't defined by your title, you're defined by what you do. And that's really what I discovered early on when I started working with inside of organizations, was those titles didn't matter as much as how I presented, what I presented. I was presenting good ideas. Those things were more important.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I love that perspective. So how did you, I guess for you, now that you're the director of thought leadership, I'm interested to know, what are you seeing? Like what's, as you do your role and as you lean into this space, what are the current trends? What are the themes that for you sort of reign supreme right now and for the past couple of years? Are there any things that you find are really central, or that you keep coming back to and looking at from different angles and presenting to the members of IBF?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question, because there is a central theme that is coming up, uh, especially during COVID. What we just dealt with. We do a lot of research at IBF as well. It's a research arm being for its membership, so we do a lot of research. And through COVID, we were doing a lot of research, seeing companies that were being able to harbor the storm a little bit more successful, the ones that didn't panic as much. What was the difference between these organizations, especially when it comes to the planning and business planning aspect? And it was the same three things that came up almost unanimously. They may call them different things, but it was in essence boiled down to the same three things. And this, I think, goes across functions, platforms, industries. I think it's very similar to these three things are looking at successful, especially in the business world. It was collaboration, consensus, and transparency. That really became the key. The organizations that really worked together, that really truly did break down the silos and talked among each other, actually to each other instead of at each other. Those functions that did that, the ones that really built consensus, because no one really knew what was going on then. And it really, even out after COVID, I think it's still, kind of a key point. No one has all the answers. So that consensus of building consensus, I think, is key as well. And that last one is probably the most difficult, but we've seen it successful, is the transparency. Being vulnerable in the business or outside of business is critical as a leader, but then also just being part of that collaborative team as well. Having that vulnerability, building that trust is the only way you're going to have collaboration, consensus, number one, but it really helps to understand what you know, what you don't know, and then you can feel free to make mistakes. You can feel free to have someone help where you don't have the answers. Those are the key things. I mean, kind of going back to the early days, my biggest lesson was I couldn't do it all. That was a big lesson for me early on. That's a time of being vulnerable and transparent, of saying, I need to bring this person in that knows more about this than I do.
Yeah.
That transparency, I think, is a key aspect. And it's one of the things we said was most successful during COVID for companies in planning, where they were transparent.
That's fantastic. And they're great insights. What would be, for listeners who are just hearing these sort of ideas for the first time, and obviously you go into more depth in your role and with IBF, but just for those who are listening going, oh, wow, that's They're probably things that I can work on for each of the three. Is there anything that you've seen that might be a good starting point in terms of, or the most obvious lever for each of those three that a leader who's listening might be able to go away and practically start working on?
Yeah, so when it comes to the collaboration piece, it's seeking out other types of points of views. It's seeking out other types of opinions. It's understanding that you don't have all the answers and seeking, advice and opinions and being open to those opinions and advice. So that would be the collaboration piece. As far as the consensus aspect, once again, there's a lot of great point of views that coming together make a better answer. Consensus allows for less bias because everyone has their individual biases they have in any decision they make. So a consensus allows to take some of that bias out of the process and some of the bias out of decision making. It actually improves decisions as well, and it increases accountability. So having a consensus allows more people to be accountable for decisions that are being made. So looking at consensus is just being able to bring in different points of view, but then kind of coordinate them into a decision. And then finally on the transparency, I said that's going to be the hardest one because that's opening yourself up, that's being vulnerable. But most things, Brene Brown, there's a lot of different books out there. A lot of, She Just Dares to Lead book just came out that talks about the vulnerability aspect of it. There's a lot of research out there that shows that from a leaders, you have to have that transparency. You have to have that vulnerability as a leader as well.
So good. I can see why you do what you do. It's really great to listen to you to unpack these things, Eric. And it really makes me want to jump into Leadership Express and spend a bit of time there because I know you're going to have some really interesting answers to these questions. So are you ready?
I am ready. It's just the rapid fire part, we do here.
Yeah, but you can feel free. I love the way you think. And so as you answer these, feel free to unpack it a bit. It doesn't have to be too fast.
Okay.
Okay. What is one, or you can give a couple of books that you've gifted to others?
I think the one book I've probably gifted the most was Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. Every time I would have an intern that would work for me, that would be the gift I would give them as they would exit, unless I'd hire them in. But that would be my standard. I actually had like 20 copies of that book that I would be passing out to my interns and professionals. So that's the book I've probably given away the most, just because it changes your thinking into more of probabilistic type thinking. A lot of people don't think probabilistically. We think, very linear, very here's equals this. When you start really thinking in probabilities and connections of things, it opens up your thought process. And especially in the business world, those are important. So Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, I think, is one that I've given away quite a few times. The Why by what's his name?
Start with Why.
Yeah, Start with Why.
By Simon Sinek.
Simon. That is a great book as well. Because I think a lot of what I do in our profession, it's relatable because you really have to understand what question you're answering. Because like I said, S&OP is a business process for decision making. You got to figure out what decisions you need to be making before you start really putting processes to it. So understanding that why is something that I think is key. So I've recommended and given that book away a few times as well. Besides my own books, obviously. I give those books away. Anybody who wants it, take it. You can have my book.
No, it's good. And I did want to mention your book. So do you want to just give people an overview of, or are there a couple of books of yours that you'd just have a chance to recommend? Because I'd love to do that.
Yeah, there's a couple books out there that I have out there right now. The newest one is Predictive Analytics for Business Forecasting. It looks at really business planning, demand planning, business forecasting, kind of the next generation. I mentioned this is the thought leadership of where we're going to go. So it's compiled from all the research that we do, but it really talks about machine learning, new ways of looking at data into an organization, where we're going. If the answers don't live inside your own four walls of your organization. How do you start looking outside of your own four walls for information, for data, to understand the consumers, to be able to model them and plan and make better decisions going forward? It takes all those concepts that you're hearing in the news about where we're going with AI and everything, and puts it in real simplistic type terms that it really lays the foundation so that executives or planners can start understanding those concepts, and then they can eventually start to apply them into their business. So it's actually utilized by a few universities and in their predictive analytics courses as well. But it's for general practitioners, executives, it's the layman can read it as well.
Yeah, wow, fantastic. And what's the title again for those who?
It's Predictive Analytics for Business Forecasting and Planning.
Wonderful. Eric Wilson. Make sure people check that out. That's good. Thank you. I really wanted to do that. So any great podcasts that you're listening to or other sources right now that you're really, they're sort of your go-to that you're reading, watching, listening to a lot at the moment?
Well, I'm biased right now because I said IBF has a lot of content from practitioners. So a lot of what I consume is reading what practitioners in our field have been writing through our Journal of Business Forecasting or our blog at demand-planning.com. I have a podcast that I actually bring people and interview them on. So that's a lot of what I'm consuming outside of my specific field. I just do a lot of reading that's non-field related. The Dance of Anger, which really doesn't really talk about anger, but it's a great book as far as talking about how to identify when some things that are triggers that are against your values or against your what you are compromising something, how to identify those key points. So books like that is what I've been. And then I said Dare to Lead. It's the new book I just got finished up too. So I mean, those kind of things I read outside of my outside of my field.
Yeah, thank you. They're great recommendations. What's a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
A recent lesson that I've learned, I would probably go back to that vulnerability aspect type thing. That one of the things I do public speaking a lot, and especially at conferences, doing a lot of trainings. And one of the things that always kind of bothered me in the trainings was that I would always get great ratings, and everyone always said they, how fantastic was and everything of that. So I didn't fully believe them, but they would say that. And the reason because I never got the interaction that I wanted to people. So I learned actually to really open myself up, besides just teaching the content, making a little bit of myself available inside those presentations that I gave a little bit as well, helped me build more of the rapport I needed with the audience. So that was a big lesson from a leadership that I had to learn, was that transparency part that I talked about. I continuously work on that. That's something I need to work on. It doesn't come natural for me. I'm very analytically minded, so so the empathy and those things aren't a natural thing for me. So I had to learn. I'm learning those. I can't say I have learned. I'm learning.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Do you have any favorite questions that you ask when you're in a one-on-one, when you're in a conversation? Over time as a leader, they've become sort of superpower go-to questions for you?
Most time I'm going to be, if I'm in a one-on-one situation, it's going to be at a conference. Is a lot of time, and my go-to is, what did you want to get out of this? Letting them talk about themselves, but then also understanding what they may feel as the gaps or what they're trying to learn, because that it generally allows us to open up a dialogue. That seems to be my go-to, and I can learn a lot from someone by asking that question if they've thought it out, or if they haven't thought it out. So generally most of my one-on-ones are at conferences. It's, what are you trying to get out of this? What do you want to learn while you're here? That's my go-to a lot of times at conferences.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. This is a question that just came up in a previous podcast I did. I can't recall, just so people know, I didn't come up with it, but I love it so much. I'm going to throw it in right now for Eric, which is, what is a commonly held belief in your industry that you passionately disagree with?
The AI is actually a thing.
You can unpack.
Oh, AI doesn't actually exist. AI is a marketing term and what they talk about in boardrooms. So, so artificial intelligence, it's fancy predictive analytics and machine learning and data, but there's no such thing as an artificial intelligence. By its own definition. There's no definitions for it. So that would be one of the big things that I disagree with most, because you have software providers, consultants, boardroom people all talking these words, and they want me to present it. They even marketing put it in my book, but I disagree with it. I don't think it exists as a thing. The other thing I think I would disagree with as well, as far as in our field, is that there's an understanding of planning just because you have a title. It goes back to the original. The title doesn't necessarily mean competence even, but that aside, it doesn't always mean a full understanding of what is being done at other levels. So there's a need to constantly be able to sell yourself and be able to explain yourself no matter what level you are, and making the assumption that, hey, my boss or my boss's boss knows exactly everything that's going on here. That's never the case.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. What's a great piece of advice you've received?
Great piece of advice I've received.
I mean, it doesn't need to be leadership specific. It could be life. Yeah. I always think about this when I'm asking people this question, and I remember it makes me laugh to think about it, just giving you a moment to as you think. But I remember my maths teacher in grade 12, Jonno thought a bit too much of himself. And I remember thinking I was really clever, saying, Miss Collins, who is my teacher, she's wonderful, wonderful person. I said, Miss Collins, what do you think is, who's going to be more successful? People who are really smart and things come easy to them, or people who work hard? And smart mouth Jonno thought she was going to say, yeah, if you're really smart and things come easy to you, it's going to be great. But I remember she turned to me and she said, people who work hard. And I just remember thinking, what? And I have no idea why I was saying that. That's a bit embarrassing, but I remembered that advice was so good, and it stuck with me, that idea that you just doing the work, showing up consistently and working hard is so important to being successful, arguably more important than natural gifts and talents. So that's mine. Have you thought of one?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, there's a couple different, I don't even call them mantras. I don't know what the word is for them. It's just things that have been in my head ever since, probably high school times or shortly thereafter, that have kind of just been my guidepost, good or bad. So I struggle to say where they may have come from, but I know I have them in my head from somewhere, and I've kind of lived by those. So I'm going to give you that, because that's the advice that I've gotten somehow.
Yeah.
And one is, the only thing you can change is yourself and the way you react to something. That was one of the things that I early on, probably my high school time, that I really had that as my guidepost, that I can't change somebody else. I'm not going to change the way they do it, but I can change myself, and I can change the way I react to what they're doing to me, or what they're saying. And that became one of my, fundamentals that I live by. And the other one, when I started getting into business, when I really started to try to figure out what I wanted to do and what skill sets that I have, it was, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So the person that can really see or interpret what may happen in the future, especially in a business organization, that person is really has a lot of capabilities or authority or whatever you want to call it inside of an organization. And that's what really drove me to forecasting and planning and strategic thinking inside of an organization.
Wow, they're great. They're great thoughts. The first one,
but I don't know who to credit with them. That's the point.
Yeah, I know it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah. Wish I had a great story of a third grade math teacher I could credit, but I don't have that.
It's funny because I had something really similar to the first piece, to the first thought you gave there, which is there's a wonderful counselor here in Brisbane. His name's Peter Janetsky, and he does a lot of great work around just around particularly dealing with emotions and interpersonal conflict. And he has a great saying, which I really love, and that is that you can't wake people up. Stop trying to
Yeah,
wake people up. And that's
there
really
you go.
helped me. And he talks about this idea of, you know what, when you and all of us, leaders who are listening, and there's that person where you stop and you go, oh, maybe I've been trying to wake them up. The thing that he's really helped me to understand is not only can I not control it, some people may never wake up. And that's not in my court, exactly like you said. But then again, some people in 10 years' time, there'll be something that happens. They'll have an aha moment, and you run into them again, you work with them again, and they've changed and they get it. But we can't wake them up. It's something that is not in our control. And I've found that very freeing.
That's along the same line. I agree. There's only so much we have control of, and most of it's just ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, brilliant. Love it. Great thought. What's a big struggle or problem that you're seeing leaders facing, particularly in the areas that you focus on when it comes to strategic forecasting? What's a big problem or challenge leaders are facing?
Uh, they get caught up too much in the now, and they instead of looking at the future to be able to plan for the future now, they get bogged down too much in the now. The other one would go back to hype on that transparency aspect, is they don't allow enough freedom of the people they're trying to lead. So they become more managing than they do leading. And that is that would be one of my biggest things that I see a lot in the executives that I've worked with and try to, develop and with different things that we're doing now in the planning arena.
Yeah, that's great. And they can fall into managing instead of leading. One of my favorite quotes
Yeah.
about the difference between management and leadership actually is from someone on this podcast who, once again, just as we've said, I can't recall. If someone listens to the different episodes and finds it, let me know, because I have quoted it a few times, but I can't recall who mentioned it. But they said, a manager is a person who you leave their office thinking they're the smartest person in the world. Wow, they're so smart. A leader is a person where you leave their office thinking you're the smartest person in the world, because they build you up and you think, gee, I can do this. I've really got this. Wow, like I'm on track. And I love that. I just thought that's such a good difference, because as leaders, it's not about people thinking how great we are. It's about actually building others up, investing in them, and to have them walk out of our office going, yeah, you know what? I met with Jonno and I can do this, and I have his support and I can take this on. Yeah, I loved that idea of thinking you're the smartest person in the room when you walk out of being with a leader and you go, wait a second, they just are great at investing.
It's a great, as far as looking at those difference. I mean, I always look at, the role of a leader. You're creating that vision, and you have the passion. That's what people follow, a vision and passion. Because most people, being honest, don't have a vision and they don't have passion. So when they see a vision and passion in someone else, they will follow. And
Yeah.
that's a leader, someone's going to follow. So a leader is the someone who can see what's going to happen in the future. That strategic thinking really creates that vision, and then just has that passion, for what they're doing and driving towards that people want to be part of that. And a good leader, that's all they have to do, and then get out of the way and let people come with them on that journey, and let people do their own things. That is a leader.
That's great as well, because it reminds me of that idea of leaders being the chief cheerleader.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing, because what's a cheerleader? A cheerleader is really passionate about cheering you on in a certain direction. And if, as a leader, if you can just walk around and cast vision and set a clear direction for where we're going as an organization and as a team, and what we see as a future that we can help create, and you're really passionate about that, I think you're right. I think that's there's a lot of simplicity in that description that rings very true.
I agree.
Okay, here's an interesting question. A movie or TV show that really impacted you?
A movie or TV show? Oh, that's a tough one, because I don't do many movies. Or the ones I do are just corny, or most I do TV for mindless.
That's all right. You know what I've had before? This is what you're following on from, Eric. I've had Golden Girls. have had, yeah, I know. Which I dealt
Ode to
with
Betty
very
White.
well. Yeah, an ode to Betty White, so true. And I've had Seinfeld, which I loved, and then we
I
talked for
love
about 10 minutes
Seinfeld.
about Seinfeld. I've
I love The
also
Big
had
Bang Theory. I love
oh yeah,
Seinfeld.
yeah, The Big Bang Theory. So there's it can be mindless. Mindless is good. I
I
like
love
encouraging
Doctor
leaders.
Who.
Ah, yes. I've never
Not the
watched Doctor
new,
Who.
not the new Doctor.
Ah, the
Up
old
until
Doctor.
the current Doctor, I mean, because the canon just destroyed with the new Doctor. She just destroyed the canon. But previous Doctor, I love the Doctor. So
Okay, I've actually just started watching. I haven't ever gotten into Doctor Who, but I've just started watching Battlestar Galactica.
okay,
That's another one. But yeah, I'm the same. I love. For me, it's the same with books, and I've mentioned this before. I love a good sci-fi fantasy book, and it feels funny talking so seriously about, or running an offsite with a team about strategy, and then I go and listen to. And I always love telling my wife Liz about the characters, and she just sits there and sort of patiently, and I can see just her temptation to roll her eyes about dragons. But it's something about, isn't it, you just having that outlet where you can switch off, and whether it's TV show or
that's what it
book,
is.
that's part of leadership. Because and so that's why I enjoy asking that question, and I always get the most interesting responses. So the old Doctor Who, I love
The
that.
older
That's a great
Doctor
one.
Who.
The older Doctor
Yes.
Who. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, last question. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
Don't be scared of failing.
Oh, that's good. It's good because it's something that we talk about a lot, but gee, it's hard, isn't it? Because
Oh,
I
it's
know
very hard
I
because
had
it's
heard
fear.
that, but I was so
It's fear.
scared. Yeah, yeah. Any tips on how, because leaders who are going, oh man, I know I shouldn't be, but gee, I'm scared of failure. Have you found anything that really helps to overcome that fear?
Failing a few times. It's like anything. You practice, you get really good at it. So
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Literally trial and error. I know
yeah.
celebrating failure. It's so good. Another quote from someone on the podcast. They said, there's winning, and I don't think they came up with it, but they shared it. There's winning. There's no winning and losing. There's only winning and learning. And I feel
Yes.
like for me, entrepreneurship, starting your own business, there's a great way to just have to learn to embrace failure in a good way, because there you sort of don't have the safety net. You're sort of forced to, as another person said, there's plan A, and then there's pivot, 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 pivot. It's like you've got your plan, but you're pivoting. But yeah, I would encourage people as well just to step out and try things and change our definition of success, and realize, or as someone else on the podcast said, I think they attributed it to Bill Gates, saying that if you want to see how successful an organization is going to be, look at how they deal with failure. And I think we want to be leaders. That's why it's such a great point to sort of end on, Eric, because we want to be leaders, and who are not afraid to fail ourselves, or are brave enough to embrace it. And we want to create a culture where another person, sorry, I'm just stringing a few of these together, but another podcast, which I love, they talked about how Warren Buffett will only give the biggest accounts. That was one of his philosophies, would only give the biggest accounts to someone who had made a big mistake before, because he knew that he had watched how they dealt with that and had learned from it. And he was confident that that they knew how to deal with making a big mistake, compared to someone who'd never made a big mistake like that. And he said, I don't know how they'll deal with it. And I just love that idea that you actually, that's the counterintuitive. We need more of that.
Yeah. Need to try.
Yeah. Get out there, give it a go. Where can people find you and your books and your podcast? I'd love for people to chase you down and find you everywhere, Eric, because you've been just such a joy to chat with. Where can people find you?
Well, my podcasts are at IBF On Demand. And you can find all of IBS content at ibf.org. That's where, vast library of content's there. And you can actually probably find the podcast there as well. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, feel free at Eric at ibf.org, Eric at ibf.org. Happy to touch base with anybody. I want to be approachable.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's great. And it's good for people to know. And yeah, well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Today's been a lot of fun, and just a great conversation about a few different things. And Eric's story was wonderful, and just a great point to finish on about not being afraid of failure. It's been a really rich episode. For our listeners, don't forget, I also have the Jonno White Leadership Podcast, where I give you tips on how to build a high performance team and, what to do on an offsite with your leadership team and those sort of things. But also the Leadership Question of the Day podcast, where I put a stone in your shoe and ask you a different question every day to challenge you. And we need to be uncomfortable as leaders. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to Eric for coming on, for sharing vulnerably and putting your money where your mouth is about that Brene Brown stuff, and just sharing. It was really wonderful to hear you share vulnerably and to chat about some of the things that your expertise is in that, to be honest, I haven't really zoned in on much before myself. And I feel like I've learned from today, and I know a lot of listeners will have really enjoyed it. So thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.